Hi, folks. Um, any video shooters in the crowd? Any of you folks starting to play with the video, documentary style work, as stills and video, a little bit of both? Yeah. My name's Bruce Dorn. I've been a shooter full-time professional shooter since 1973, the Jurassic era, back when studio strobes were steam powered and all of that. I started out as a fashion photographer right here in Manhattan. I had a penthouse studio down on 5th Avenue near 19th Street. Went right from college to shooting for Condé Nast, Women's Wear Daily, all that stuff. Wasn't really cut out for fashion though. Liked hard news and journalism quite a bit more. So I wandered up the street to the Time Life building and buddied up to a couple of the photo editors there and ended up doing quite a bit of work for them. Segued into advertising photography, still photography, but ultimately found my way into shooting motion. I think it was about 1980, after a stint of teaching at the university level. I had an opportunity to do a little camera work on a TV commercial shoot. Somebody had invited me in to be a lighting consultant to a cameraman, and then liked what I did, and then on the subsequent job offered me the opportunity to be the shooter. So I made a quick segue from shooting still cameras to shooting 35mm Arriflex. Lots of similarities between the two mediums, the still and motion capture. A lot of differences as well. But ended up dropping the still camera for quite a bit. I ended up shooting for about 25 years in Hollywood and around the world, and sort of didn't even own a still camera during that time period. Hated video, hated it. Had a chance, I think back in, I want to say it was 74, 75, I shot the band Yes in Madison Square Gardens on a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel black and white video recorder that was the size of an American Tourister suitcase, and another thing on my shoulder the size of an American Tourister suitcase, and it was just awful. But it was an introduction to video, made me realize I did not like video, and I stayed away. Hi8, the various 8mm video form factors came, and I tried them once in a while. Eventually they got into the HDV cameras, the ones that were shooting tape. And you know, the full resolution HD stuff looked a little better, but there was still something wrong with it in my mind. And what ultimately I figured out was wrong with it was the fact that the sensors are just too dang small. You know, the depth of field increases or decreases with increased size in your format. Any of you shot 35mm film, 2 1/4 film, maybe 4x5. The larger that you went on your film format, the shallower the depth of field for any given f-stop. So if you're using like a 4x5 camera, f11 is not much depth of field at all. It's a ton of depth of field on a little pocket point and shoot camera. And that relationship translates into video cameras as well. You know, the little tiny sensors that they have in most of the camcorders are smaller than your pinky fingernail. And it just reacts in such a way that it gives you a massive amount of depth of field, which is a look that's different from motion picture capture, which is of course working on like an 18x24 form factor. 35mm movie film runs through the camera vertically instead of horizontally, and a 35mm, you know, form factor still camera like was established with the Leicas way back in the day, 24x36, about 1 inch by 1.5 inch piece of film. When it's running through the camera vertically, it's 18x24, which turns out to be about the exact same size as the sensor in an APS-C camera. So if you've got like a 60D T2i Rebel 7D, or one of the ones made by that other company that uses the APS-C size sensors, you're actually working with a format that's very familiar to the motion picture community. The larger sensors, like you find in the 5D Mark II, Mark III, and the 1DX, are actually larger and have a shallower depth of field look than what the motion picture guys are used to. But Hollywood's embraced all of this stuff. When Canon brought out the 5D Mark II, and I guess it was '08, so we're looking at 4 years ago now, Vincent Laforet famously borrowed a camera over the weekend and shot his piece Reverie, which crashed the Canon websites worldwide in terms of viewership. Quite a mistake, by the way, because they were on a pay-per-click basis at that time. And a lot of people got in a lot of trouble because they made, the web hosting companies made a lot of money off of that. But a few days later, Canon engaged me to do some footage. So I was actually maybe the first guy hired to actually shoot something with the SLRs. And I produced a piece that's still on the Canon website called a 3-act play. They wanted to try to present a piece that would talk to event filmmakers like wedding, bar mitzvah filmmakers and so on. And so I did a little piece that related to shooting event coverage with the 5D Mark II. Since then, I've been mixing it in with my still coverage, and gradually I've become more of a filmmaker again than a still shooter. I should add that back in about 2001, I retired from Hollywood, where I had a production company making TV commercials. I've made over 1,000 national and international television spots, including Super Bowl spots, all the high-end stuff that you've suffered through over the years. I apologize for all the TV commercials I've made that you had to watch or scan over, as they do nowadays. But I sort of laid off doing filmmaking, started doing digital art. My wife and I are both involved with Corel and the Corel Painter program. We were doing a lot of digital painting. Got back into digital still work because back when the first 3-megapixel still cameras came out around 1999, picked up the still camera again, started playing with it, got the attention of Canon, blah, 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 ended up in the Explorers of Light program. So cut to recent times, and what I've been doing is well, we retired to a small community, a little mountain community out in Arizona, Prescott, Arizona. It's about 5,000 feet above sea level, so we're about 20 degrees cooler than Phoenix on any given day. And in what is commonly a very, very bad business practice, I approached the city fathers and volunteered my services pro bono. Went up to the city manager, found out who was the director of public affairs, a nice fellow as it turned out, and I said, I'll tell you what, give me a document that says I'm the official photographer of Prescott, Arizona, and I'll shoot all your parades and events and everything for you for free. That's a terrible business model. Until you realize that I meet every single mover and shaker in the city. And they get my footage to be able to use it to promote the town, but they don't get it to promote any of the businesses. If any of the businesses decide that they want some of the footage, who's the only cinematographer that they've ever met? Me. And I've already shot the stuff, and for the most part, I only provide them with things that I think are a good representation of my skill set. It also allows me to introduce myself to the fire department guys, the police department guys, the SWAT team, all that. And it's very nice to have a piece of paper you can whip out that says, Bruce is the official cinematographer, leave him alone. So I could pretty much be doing anything as long as I've got a camera with me, and I have a fairly good chance of getting away with it. So let me run this piece, which is a compilation of shots that I've done for the city. And it recently won a Telly Award of some sort. I didn't know there were Telly Awards, but they're out there. And Prescott, like all small metros, wants more. They want more businesses. They want more of their young people to remain in town. They want folks to move there. They want people to visit there. So this is something called Live, Work, Play. They call them movies for a reason. I try to keep the camera moving all the time. We have a nice little community college, several community colleges in fact. Lots of artists retire to the area. The Western arts are very big in Prescott. Typical 4th of July parade out there. Sort of got my Zapruder on and did sort of a Super 8 look for that. You know, they try to keep their hands in on the arts. Got a nice little Victorian theater that I get to use quite frequently. This gal's a glass artist. Her husband is a metal artist, and they've retired up to the high country and crank out their work. We do have some high tech. This is a silicone wafer refurbishing company. The Medevac guys, they charge about $40,000 an hour. I guess when you're laying by the side of the road, that seems like a smoking deal. But my thinking is they've probably got some pretty good budget for doing some promotional stuff as well. Beautiful area. There's that park where I just shot the yoga girl. This place is about 100 yards away from my studio. This gal teaches at one of the community colleges. I went out with her and had her climb this same route 3 times. Once while I was hanging on to the cliff face right next to her, handheld. Jumped back, there she is in the lower corner, still down there in the lower corner. Tight, medium, wide. Kind of a cow town, you know, we got a lot of ranches around the area. Ended up meeting a lot of folks involved with rodeo. Ended up working on a couple of year-long documentary on youth rodeo. Being a high alpine area, we have these exquisite lakes and a few trout scattered about. C-clamp mounting my 60D on the front of the kayak and then the back. Little slider shot moving in. Here I'm scurrying as fast as my 60-year-old legs can carry me to keep up with the mountain bikers. Because I had sucked up, ingratiated myself to the city managers, I was able to borrow a cherry picker to get that overhead shot. Small Steadicam, little Steadicam Merlin 2, stuff it through the tree branches, moving toward the jogger, camera mounted on the ground for the doggy to jump over, reverse. You think in a storytelling style, you know, if you're a still shooter making the transition, just think photo essay, think story. And whenever you're trying to tell a story, you've got to establish place. First of all, you start with a master shot. You may not use it in this sequence, but you want to establish where you are with a good master or a long shot. Medium shot, close-ups. And when you're in dialogue, you do a 2-shot, then you do singles, back and forth, you do cutaways. You give a lot of coverage so that the editor has a chance to make something out of it. Whenever you're rolling a shot, make sure that you roll. I'm sorry if it's fundamental stuff I'm telling you. I'm going to just cover fundamentals and go through more advanced stuff, but roll at least 15 to 20 seconds on any B-roll type shot. That is a shot where you're just shooting for the beauty of the footage. If you're shooting for sound, you're recording dialogue, listen to what's being said. Don't cut right in the middle of a long monologue. If somebody is expressing a thought and you just suddenly decide that your shot composition sucks and you're going to recompose, you're really giving up a lot of the story when you cut right in the middle of someone's dialogue. So really have those headphones on and be listening to what's going on. Now, the SLRs and even the C300s, which I'm starting to work with now, have no autofocus. The most basic camcorder has autofocus, and some of the very basic camcorders have facial recognition. Interestingly enough, the SLRs, with a few exceptions, I think Sony's starting to play with it, are strictly manual, or they have what I like to refer to as glacially fast autofocus in video mode, where, yeah, they will eventually acquire focus, but not at a speed that is really useful. But the truth is, if you pick up a Panavision or an Aeroflex, you will find no switch or button or setting on there anywhere that says A for auto. 100% manual, because we have the best data processor right here. Just as with exposures, I can't honestly tell you the last time I even glanced at the meter in the camera now that we have histograms. I shoot a test frame with a best guess sort of approach, adjust until I get the exposure I like, and then I go from there. I was teaching a workshop a couple of weekends ago out in Sedona, a beauty workshop, and everybody was freaking out because my suggestions for exposures didn't match what their meters were saying. But we were getting great exposures because looking at what was actually happening rather than blindly following a machine's suggestions. Manual focus is one of the biggest challenges in this era of autofocus everything. If you're shooting stills, you probably, like I do, lean on that autofocus quite a bit. Hear that beep, see that light up, you know you've acquired focus. It's really great. In motion, you really have to think about where you're sending the viewer's eye and how you're assigning the plane of focus during the shot. It's not as simple as focus once and leave it alone, everything is happy. You have stuff moving and you have to decide where you want to move the plane of focus. First step to becoming good as a filmmaker is to learn to control your focus. When I first got the 5D, I went out and shot this little piece. This was up in Kalispell, Montana, and they were doing a rough stock roundup, and I took out my super telephoto, figuring that it's the hardest thing to focus. And they were chasing these rodeo horses around in this snowy field, and I decided to just practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So just like a cheetah that sees a group of antelope, you can't chase the whole herd. You have to pick out an individual and go after that. So I would find a horse and try to track focus on it, learning the nuance of the lens's helicoid. Each lens that you have is going to focus a little differently unless it is a pure cinema lens. Canon, Zeiss has started to produce pure cinema lenses, which are 270 degrees of rotation on the focusing helicoid to go from the closest focus to infinity. All of the fly-by-wire lenses, that is, all the autofocus EOS style lenses, here I snap the focus back to the horse in the foreground after chasing the other ones into the background. All of the contemporary still camera lenses have an electromagnetic connection. It's fairly rare to find a true helicoid focusing mechanism inside the lens. So you quite often have a very minor amount of adjustment to go from 10 feet to 30 feet. So you've got to know your particular lenses. And I strongly suggest that you work with your favorite lens for quite a while exclusively while you're learning this craft, so that you become intuitive with the movement, that you know how much movement it requires to go from 5 feet to 15 feet, from 5 feet to 8 feet. Finding stuff that works on the Z-axis, things that's coming straight to you, is a great thing to practice with. I always get someone who comments, well, that's all fine for you. You live out west and you have horses and stuff to photograph. Somewhere in your neighborhood there's a kid that's got ADD and you have access to sugary drinks, and you could get them all wired up on sugar and have them run around the neighborhood, and that would make great focusing practice for you, I'm sure. In the process of assigning myself different projects to do, to practice, because I'm a strong believer in being fully skillful at something before I offer my services for money, I always give myself a lot of little practice sessions. I knew that over in Socorro, New Mexico, it's about 90 miles south of Albuquerque, there's a bird refuge, National Wildlife Refuge, and every December, usually around December 5th, somewhere in there, something in the neighborhood of 60,000 light geese, white snow geese, come down to this Bosque del Apache Wildlife Refuge to spend the winter. They're joined by 20 to 30,000 sandhill cranes, and interestingly, a number of eagles come in there to predate on them, and there was a cougar in the area this year. We didn't see him, but we went out there with the notion of just shooting around and getting a little practice playing with super wides and super tellies. So this is nothing more than a self-imposed project to get out there and see what we could do. Crack of dawn stuff. Midday is kind of tedious, but if you've got a good clouds in the sky, it's quite beautiful. This is near the area that's been burning lately, so I hope it's not too ruined around there. Using landscape picture style. If you're a raw shooter with your stills, you probably don't have a tremendous amount of experience with picture styles. If you're a JPEG shooter, then picture styles are something you should be paying attention to. And if you're shooting video with your SLRs, pay attention as well, because picture styles bake in the look at the moment of capture in video. I produced a series of instructional videos on custom picture styles for Canon that are on the Canon Digital Learning Center, a great asset, by the way. Canon Digital Learning Center has a number of speedlight videos that I've produced, the picture styles, and I just finished another series on the new 600EX radio-based speedlights. But this kind of thing gives me a great opportunity to get out there and play with the cameras and practice a bit. My main shooting tool, most of the time, is one of the SLRs, and I say one of the SLRs because I love them all for different reasons. This is the new Mark III, which I have recently been shooting with quite a bit. It's outfitted with IDC System 0, which is available here in B&H, which is a friction-based follow focus. Very reasonably priced. You can quickly change lenses, no gear requirements for the lenses. It uses a high-tech O-ring to make contact, and it's just brainlessly simple to get better at your follow focus with one of these because this does not have a gearbox like the rest of the gear-driven products that are similar on the market. When I roll the wheel away from me, the focus goes away. When I roll the wheel back, the focus comes to me. So I can intuitively know, oh, I'm starting to come toward this gentleman, I want to push toward the girl in the background. I can roll the focus super simply. I don't get lost on the focusing ring out front. Also has an underslung mount so that I can do poor boy steady cam. I can balance the camera's attitude by where I place my hand on the handle, and then push down on the camera, pull up, that stabilizes it. Essentially my arm is the same as the arm on a Steadicam. I do like the Steadicam products. The little Steadicam Merlin works great with the 60D, but the 5D is a bit too heavy for that. You got to move up to the Pilot or the Flyer, and they get really spendy. So I end up doing quite a bit of my Steadicam work just like so. It's kind of an old school trick to triangulate the pressure. I generally don't have a strap on my camera. That's just something else that is annoying and adds shake to the camera, but when I'm working on these expedition type shoots, which I'm going to show you some stuff from here very shortly, it's good to be able to throw that over my shoulder when I'm working with a second camera. When I work in high stress environments, someplace where it's extremely dusty, freezing cold, sleet, snow, whatever, I try not to change lenses. So I will tend to use zooms. I love prime lenses, but I also really love these, the Canon zooms. The 5D almost always has a 24-105 on it, image stabilized. That's fantastic. I seldom record sound directly from the camera. If you're miking from the camera, you will hear the sound of your image stabilizer, but that's generally going to be terrible sound anyway. So that is generally my SLR package with the full frame. If I'm shooting with a 60D or a 7D, I tend to use the 17-55 f2.8 image stabilized. That's roughly the equivalent of a 28-90 2.8 image stabilized if it were full frame coverage. Doesn't have the same weather sealing as the L glass. I have found that my 17-55 does pick up dust a little bit internally. CPS cleans it out really nicely, always makes it beautiful, but it is a little more prone to dust. I'll tend to also use the 10-22 short zoom on the 60Ds or the 7D when I'm doing Steadicam shots. When I'm doing Steadicam shots, whether they're real Steadicam or my own handheld Steadicam, I don't tend to try to track focus, I tend to zone focus. You know, if I was trying to hold this steady and then I was still operating the wheel, I mean, I can do it, but it's a fairly skillful operation. I find that it's generally better to stop the lens down a little bit, call it an f11, focus the thing at about 6 feet, and I'm generally in focus from 3.5 feet to 25 feet anyway with that, with a wide angle. So I can just choreograph my shot. Ahead of time, I might be doing a real elaborate shot that ends up on a waist-high shot on this gentleman. I figure out what that distance is. That's about 5 or 6 feet. I'll pre-focus the camera at 6 feet. When I'm on the move through the landscape, come up and end up at this spot, all looks great. If you watch the Steadicam shots as they occur in my footage, you'll probably not see anything going dreadfully out of focus, and I'm just not hassling with it too much. It's just not that hard. So, as a byproduct of introducing myself to the city fathers and the various businessmen around town, I ended up, let's see, where's my book here? It took off. Journal. Oh, okay. There's a magazine being published in Prescott called the Overland Journal, and it's dedicated to overland travel, adventure travel all over the world by way of bicycle, motorcycle, cars, whatever. I ended up hooking up with these guys, making friends, because one of the gentlemen, actually the publisher of the magazine, the CEO and publisher of the magazine, contacted me to talk about HD filmmaking when he found out I was in Prescott as well. We became buddies pretty quickly, and it wasn't terribly long before he invited me to go out on an adventure, and I'm going to show you a little video from one of those adventures. But currently, I mean, as in right now, I'm involved in this E7 project. The goal is to set a Guinness World Record by traveling across all 7 continents in the exact same vehicles. A number of people have, driven or ridden in a variety of continents. That's not that uncommon, but to take the exact same vehicle, and including Antarctica, that's never been done. So we've got the potential to set a Guinness record. We recently completed North America. We started on April 19th above Prudhoe Bay, out on the pack ice with the polar bears and such. Started out up there, came down all the way to Flagstaff, Arizona. Took a brief break while there was a convention of overlanders going on. And then I'm just back, about 10 days back from going the rest of the way across North America to Cape Spears in Newfoundland. And we stopped here at B&H on our way through, hit the sidewalk out in front, bought some extra batteries and a couple of lenses and so on, met all the high rollers here at B&H, and then continued on our way. So we're traveling in 2 tricked out Toyota Land Cruisers that were acquired from New Zealand. They're a specification. The Oceana spec version of it is right-hand drive, twin turbo diesel. We've outfitted the interiors so that we can cook, sleep, travel in them wherever. And currently they're on a ship on their way to Oslo. So I will be, on July 2nd, I'll be traveling to Oslo. We'll uncrate the vehicles, and then we're going to drive to Nordkapp, which is the northernmost road in the world. So we'll be going higher than we were when we were up in Alaska, get way up into the area of the Northern Lights, and we'll be then coming back down through Eastern Europe. We're going to do Belarus, Ukraine, all of that stuff, ultimately ending up in Nice, France, where there will be a service stop, and then about 3 or 4 weeks later, we'll go to Russia and begin a trip across Russia from St. Petersburg to Magadan via the Road of Bones. Stalin built this highway literally on the bones of the intellectuals. He rounded up all the intellectuals and forced them into labor camps. They died along the way, and they essentially rolled them into the substrate of the road. Great place to live, I guess. It doesn't pay off to be smart in some climes, but I've been working with the C300 and the 5D Mark IIs, and this is just a little beginning promo for it that we did. I'm also sponsored by Western Digital on this.
What is the true nature of overland adventure? It begins with an idea. A journey in 2 Toyota Land Cruisers over some of the most historically significant overland travel routes on each of the 7 continents, including Prudhoe Bay, Trans-Iceland, Nordkapp, the Road of Bones, the Canning Stock Route, Trans-Africa, Ruta 40 to Ushuaia, and Antarctica as our final destination. An idea that can only be accomplished by a crew of experienced adventurers and a solid team of well-chosen partners. It takes preparation and hard work and a lot of carefully selected gear. Gear that will not only help us to survive in extreme conditions, but also thrive and fully experience all the breathtaking wonder that nature has to offer. We're going places few have ever seen, and ultimately experiencing the unimaginable. It's not about knowing whether we can survive in nature, but if we could ever survive without it. Hi, I'm Western Digital Creative Master Bruce Dorn, and I'm going to be tagging along on this expedition as director and cinematographer. No matter where we go, from frozen tundra to windswept dunes, from chilly mountaintops to sweltering jungle, I'm going to be backing up all of our precious data on the Western Digital My Passport drives. These guys are as rugged as the vehicles we're traveling in, so I expect zero problems. The adventure begins April 2012, and you can follow along as I post from the field at wdcreativemasters.com.
So, any of you professional shooters? Anybody working at it? It's an amazing thing to be able to stumble into nice jobs, and you don't really stumble into them, you angle your way into it. Whether you're an amateur looking to improve your own documentary coverage of your own holidays and so on, or if you're a pro, you still have to have the same basic approach, and that is to be constantly aware of what's going on around you and documenting it as best you can. As a commercial shooter, as somebody who wants to get paid to do this kind of stuff, or have someone at least pay for all the expenses of doing it, that has to do with having your ears sharply tuned to opportunity. You know, there are a lot of grants out there that are available that go wanting, that people don't apply for. If things like adventure travel are on your bucket list and you want to end up seeing some of these amazing places, there's a real good chance you could write a grant and get an opportunity to do it. You just have to have a good angle. You have to really think about it in terms of how you present the story that you want to document. This particular adventure is privately funded. We're not financed by Canon, although I'm using Canon stuff and wringing out Canon gear at every opportunity, testing it under really extreme conditions. They may at some point come to me for some of my footage. Toyota is not paying for it. This is all privately funded, but we may end up that we make a sale to Toyota. The goal is that we're trying to get a 9-part miniseries out of it. But unlike most of the adventure or documentary series that you see right now that are covered with multiple cameras and multiple filmmakers, this is essentially being done by me and one other guy who's there when I'm not. We're kind of taking spells on this because neither of us can afford to be gone all of the time. Senway Xavier is a commercial cinematographer out of Los Angeles, and he's in Iceland right now shooting some Icelandic glacier crossings with some specially prepped Toyotas that are similar to the ones we're traveling in. The ones we're traveling in are on board a ship, and Iceland is not a continent, so it's not really considered to be a part of this, but it's a training session for the guys for when we get to Antarctica. So let me just jump ahead here. I did get Western Digital to join us. They are providing us with all of our backup materials. I'm one of the Western Digital Creative Masters. They've got Colin Finley, who's a war correspondent, social photographer sort of fella. And they've got Peter Miller from Sports Illustrated and myself as the 3 Western Digital Creative Masters. And I'm that guy that always has my ear attuned to possibilities. When Western Digital sent out a prototype of a new ruggedized case for their hard drives for us to give feedback on, the Creative Masters to respond to its design, I pitched the notion of doing a little promotional piece for it if they wanted to. And they did come back to me with a yes on that, and so I got to go out and produce a little documentary, or should I say a nonverbal TV commercial for it. Western Digital sells all over the world, and they ultimately translated what little text there is on here into, I think it was 17 languages. So obviously they have far reach. The criterion for this was to talk about their ruggedized hard case for their pocket drives so that you could use them in harsh environments, and do it in a nonverbal manner so that we didn't have to dub in multiple languages. So this is the story of the world's most clumsy nature cinematographer out for a couple of days playing in the Utah high country. Went out and shot some time lapse for this, including motion control time lapse, and then choreographed a series of scenes to show how this rugged hard case might be useful. All shot with Canon SLRs, just like she's wielding there. Think about all the different angles to tell a simple story. They won't be there for you in editing or for an outside editor if you don't shoot them. So whenever you're setting up a scene, you want to be sure to analyze how to tell the story in a sequence of images. If you're fresh to editorial, just sort of getting your feet wet on it, watch your favorite movie sequences with the sound shut off. It's very educational. We're very distracted by the story, the sound design, the monologues, the dialogue, all that. You can learn a lot by just studying the structure of the shots. I think this is fun too. I got a couple little behind the scenes on this that show actually how we produced it. And pretty simple stuff, SLR work. These were, time-lapse takes an hour to shoot a little piece like that, so you got to go out for a dedicated session. I created a little motion control tracking slider that could move the camera while it was shooting time-lapse. Super Tele, 400 millimeter here to get the lens compression. Ken the Rent-A-Cougar. If you need a cougar, I can get you one. A little spot color. So we shot the landscapes up in Utah, and then this was all on the roadside in Sedona, literally in the parking lot of a real estate office. There's the creepiest thing you'll ever see. But that's why I love Steadicam. It gives me a chance to follow girls really close without a permit. That's an IDC System 1 rig there. Follow focus, and it's got a little bracket for a small HD monitor. As you can see, a massive crew, me, and then my bride shooting the behind the scenes footage. Other than that, nobody. It's astonishing how much you can do with minimal to no crew, and that's kind of my story out there on the road. Canon's been throwing financing bucks at Hollywood filmmakers to do demonstration pieces on the C300 and C500, 50 people crew and so on. What I think is interesting is what you can do with these cameras with no crew. It's not a popular idea among the various union crew people, but you actually can do a great deal by yourself. And it's my theory that everybody has a story somewhere in them, and that It might be worthy of being turned into a short film or a documentary or even a narrative feature. The tools are now available. This is going up to shoot some time lapse up in Capitol Reef National Park. We left the cougar in the dryer a little bit too long. And this is how you get Ken the rent-a-cougar to go where you want. You throw bits of meat. Never wear anything, any meat-related clothing items when you're working with big cats. And that was when he heard a kid squealing with joy in the distance, and it immediately triggered his predatory instinct. He was ready to go. And Kel is a Navajo street performer there in Sedona, and we hooked up with him, and he came along and provided us with the track. Yeah, I don't care if it hurt his knees, I just want take two. Do it again, there you go. All right. So the rig that you've been seeing is we're about to introduce here at B&H. In fact, we're out to do some training this week on System 1. And System 1 is identified by this dovetailed bracket on the bottom. I use these a lot handheld, although I really designed it as, I designed this product, I designed it as a tripod rig because I noticed that most of the affordable fluid head tripods out there, Gitzo, Manfrotto, and the moderately priced Sockler heads, all use a very similar sized dovetail. So this guy goes directly into the 501s, 502, 503, 504 Manfrottos. It goes into that little Gitzo head that uses the dovetail style, 2280 I think it is. And then the Sockler Ace, the FSB 4, 6, and 8, it actually clicks in, and then it gives you perfect balance because it slides, no quick release plate required. If you use another brand of tripod that has a oddly shaped quick release plate, this has 3/8, 16, and 1/4 20 on the bottom, so you can put your adapter on it. But if you use one of the more common tripods that uses this 501 style plate, then you can put it in there, and no matter what kind of lens you have on it, you can impeccably balance it. And this is available with a 6-inch rail, 9-inch, 12-inch, 16-inch, so that you can use it with a variety of different focal lengths and still get great balance. Again, the friction-based follow focus, super quick for lens changes. I'm using the 70-300 here, although the 70-200 f2.8 is my, you'll pry it from my cold dead fingers lens. I've made a lot of money with that 70-200. This is turning out to be a fantastic lens for my expedition work because it gives me that extra 100 millimeters of reach. Interestingly, Canon broke their policy of having the zoom ring in the back and the focusing ring in the front, which means on the 70-200 you've got to have a really long plate in order to get your focusing wheel out to where the focusing ring is. On this new 70-300L, the focusing ring is at the back. So it's very compact when it's closed up, and actually I can shoot, because it's image stabilized, I can shoot beautiful handheld footage with this. It's not terribly cumbersome. I can literally hold the camera with the focusing wheel assembly. I just put my hand in like so. Now I've got these fingers free to focus and then have a good grip and triangulate. I'm gravitationally gifted. Some say fat, which means I'm very stable when I get my breathing right. So that works beautifully with the C300. And boy, am I lucky, I've got two of them. I will say that one of these is mine and the other one is on loan from Canon Pro Services, so I could show off two at a time. But there's my rig with the monitor installed. And the monitor is really great. It's the same monitor that's off the XF300. And a beautiful, easy to use deal. And here is that 17-55 f2.8 I was talking about. Now a matte box is nice if you've got to cut down the sky a little bit with a grad. And matte boxes, unfortunately, are the thing that a lot of people spend a bunch of money on when they start filmmaking. They get their SLR and they go out and spend a bloody fortune on a matte box, which the term matte box actually refers back to when we had in-camera mattes. Back in the old original King Kong era, what they would have done, and I have a homemade lens cap in here because I can't really get a lens and cut some styrene to make a lens cap that goes into the filter stage. But back in the day, the reason for a matte box was so that you could doubly expose a piece of film. So let's say you wanted to do Fay Ray on the side of the Empire State Building inside a window, and then King Kong climbs the building. So you would set up a set over here with a window and a little piece of the facade of the Empire State Building and the blonde in the evening gown in the window, effects fans blowing on her hair, and you would cover part of the frame, everything but where the girl's going to be. And you would you'd note exactly what point you lined up the film in the camera, what sprocket hole, and then with half the frame covered, you would film the girl going, "Oh no, here comes King Kong." Run that whole piece of film through there, rewind it, line it up on the exact same sprocket hole, now cover the part where she had been, exposing the rest, and now you have the miniature of the Empire State Building with the guy in the monkey suit climbing up it. And it blends together because this is so close to the lens that this edge is blurry. So you have the exact matching pieces exposed separately, and that little bit of blur blended together and it worked beautifully. So that's what a matte box was for. Nowadays it's a glorified lens hood and perhaps a filter holder. And these guys, when you can find them, are fantastic. That's a Lee Compendium lens shade. Compendium referring to the, the accordion-like bellows on that thing. And it actually has 2 filter stages, and that's, as I remember, it was in the neighborhood of $250 or something like that. Now you can spend $3,000 on a matte box, and it's rather ridiculous, really. It's the last thing I'd spend a lot of money on is a big elaborate matte box, but a lot of people do. So there's the rig with the extra wheel assembly on it to create a zoom control. And in the case of the longer lenses, you can actually put a second wheel assembly in and get some zoom control. I will say I don't zoom hardly ever during a video shot because it looks like a video shot. I operated motion picture cameras for many, many years, and we would dolly always. We always tried to move. I used a lot of zooms, but frankly I used them as varifocals so that I had a choice of a lot of different focal lengths. So here's a little look at that camera. I'll give you a little closer look since it's dark in here. You can see what the rig looks like. That's a Gitzo head, and again, it's that very common dovetail style. Big cost savings that you don't have to buy gears for your lenses. The gears cost between $20 and $200 depending on what brand gears you're using. And you have to use set screws on your lenses and stuff to lock the lens gears in place. I don't like it. I'm fortunate to have a pretty good collection of Canon glass, and it would get quite expensive if I had to put the ring gears in each and every one. Makes focus racks really simple and fun. And our gears System 0, which is already here in B&H, is in use by the New York Times, LA Times, BBC, CNBC. CNBC's Tech This Out is shot using System 0, IDC System 0. It's used on Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations. So it's a really super compact little kit. Now, expanding once more on the notion of pro bono work paying off, having done a little work for the city, I'm sort of an insider with the folks around there. Canon every now and then surprises me with a little present, and on Christmas Eve a C300 showed up. This was before they were in ready release. One showed up on my doorstep with a single battery and no instruction book, and I was allowed to have it until December 27th. So that was nice. A Christmas present that I had to return, and no warning whatsoever. But I had met these street performers a little bit earlier. They're in a group called Pyroclectic, and they juggle and perform with fire. So I ran down to this fire marshal's office and got a fire permit. So the budget on this particular shoot was $130. We spent about $18 on gasoline, $100 on a fire permit, and then we shared a Subway sandwich. But this was produced over the course of 2 nights, and each night I was able to work with a single battery and come home with some juice still left in the battery. The resolution, or the blacks, are so much nicer on the monitors than on the screen with the LED lights going in the room. But on the test night, on Christmas Eve, I went out and tested exposures, or tested ISO ratings from 6400 up to 20,000. Actually, the native ISO rating is about 850 on this camera. I found that 6400 matched my vision. In other words, if I look out into the room right now and I can see some of your faces clearly and some of them sketchily, that's what ISO 6400 looks like on this camera. No supplemental lighting. It was lit by practical fixtures that existed in the environment and the fire.
You said your ISO was what?
6400. And I was shooting between a 6.3, around an f6.3. So I actually had a fair amount of stop. Handheld. I'm going to show you behind the scenes on this so you can see how this was made as well. This parking garage, these mercury vapor lights were so bright, it was unbelievable. I mean, you know, they're not bright lights, but at 6400 ISO and shutter speed of 1/60th of a second, it's amazing light gathering tool, and I don't really perceive grain. At 20,000 it gets grainy, but it's definitely usable.
What would the Mark III look like?
The Mark III would look very good too, yeah. The Mark III, I think, you know, I haven't shot a lot of low light with it. I just got my Mark III, so the question was, how would it compare? I think the Mark III will compare very favorably to it.
What more are you getting with, say, with the C300 over 5?
Yeah, the question is, what does the C300 give me that the SLR doesn't? It gives me great sound control. I mean, you know, you can adjust your audio and monitor it now on the Mark III, but on the C300 you've got waveform monitor, you've got audio monitoring very simply, you've got peaking controls, you've got a really robust body that is more cinema oriented and more familiar to a cinematographer. But you can absolutely do equally good stuff with the SLRs. If you're doing a lot of sound, I think the C300 is a good choice. So going between 400 millimeter on the tight stuff here, 14 millimeter for these low angle deals. And then this is the only place where I used any supplemental lighting. I shot a spotlight up under the bridge so that I could identify it. And remember in my 5th grade science, where oil floats on water, gasoline is a derivative of oil, so we put gasoline on the wet street.
That movement that you did up with, what was that?
A jib arm, which I'll show you in the behind the scenes, you'll see that. And I also went up high and shot off of the bridge handheld for these. And that was shot in, on the C300, they don't have picture styles like we're familiar with in the SLRs. They have cine styles or cine settings, and that was in Canon cine mode. I've subsequently used the Canon log, which is a real low contrast, low saturation picture style, I'll call it for lack of a better name, that is almost like a raw processor, almost like a raw form factor, but it's not really. So this is a behind the scenes so you can see how it was done. Essentially, again, minimal crew, one assistant, and then the editor was along, and I pressed him into service carrying things. The fascinating streets of Prescott, Arizona, as you can see, it's got a lot of nightlife. So this behind the scenes was shot with a 7D very casually, so it's not got as much production value in the behind the scenes as in the stuff we were shooting. That's a dolly that I'm going to be hopefully getting into B&H. It's a conduit-based dolly that uses monopods rather than a tripod, so you can have up to 10 feet of dolly length because the conduit, which is so cheap as to be disposable, comes in 10-foot lengths. I cut a 10-foot segment in half, and that gives me 2 pieces of 5-foot for track, and then I have another pair of 10-footers. When I travel, I carry the actual dolly caddy and the leg assemblies, and then I just buy the conduit in the city that I go into. It was so dark out there, there's a sun gun on me so you can find me, but had to wear that headlamp so I could see the controls on the camera. There's the dolly at work. Call it the all-terrain dolly because each of the legs, of course, being a monopod means you can set it up on the most convoluted surface you can come up with. I can set it up easily in a boulder field or in a creek. It's take the legs off, put it on the ground. This is an early prototype. It's in a lot sexier condition now. But you can do some pretty cool shots with a real low angle dolly like that.
What are you going to call it?
The all-terrain dolly. It's on the website now. So neat little pullback reveal like that. 400 millimeter for these close-ups. This is the 17 to 55 handheld. I think I may have gone to a 16 to 35 on there as well at some point. Pan off to black so that the editor has a chance to do something with a little bit of a camera move. Second night, I knew I wanted to shoot something right at twilight. Notice it's got the tilt shift on here. I believe that's the 17 tilt shift. And then use some bungee cords to be able to move the camera aggressively and softly. It's a high-tech wool hat to act as a bumper. In fact, I love those wool hats. As soon as it gets to be cold, I go down to Kmart and buy every one they have. I use them for packing my lenses and packing camera bodies. My assistant's holding a little LED sun gun so we can see the actors. There's the jib arm. You can get a jib for about 500 bucks. They don't have to be terribly complex.
I got one for $450 right here.
Yeah. And while I won't claim that the Canon cameras are fireproof, I have engulfed them in balls of fire briefly and they've managed to survive it. Don't quote me on that, however. Filmmaking on Christmas. Being chased by a chihuahua at the end. There we go. So I'll show you the System Zero, which is the one that I was hand holding. This is more of what I consider to be my handheld rig. Optional accessory mounting bracket. The basic follow focus with dedicated camera plates, I think right at 399 bucks. You can add a viewfinder. It'll take the Zacuto viewfinder. We adapt a Hoodman viewfinder to it. But it's perfect custom fit. We don't believe in generic fitment. Notice it says 60D on that camera plate. It pin registers to the bottom of the 60D. We're making them for all the popular cameras. And if you end up with an IDC System 0 or System 1 and you change cameras, you can buy a new camera plate and everything else remains the same. You can update with another perfect fit camera plate. I find that when people have to make a lot of adjustments to their accessories, that they invariably adjust them wrong or just sort of ignore the fine tuning of it and end up with a less than desirable function. So we just make ours so that it fits perfectly and there's no thinking required to install it. So been doing real well for us here at B&H. And this is an interesting piece, I think. Tyler Stableford, any of you guys heard of him, Tyler? He's another one of the explorers. Tyler is ranked as one of the top 10 adventure photographers working by Outside Magazine. And Tyler lives up near Aspen, Colorado. And last winter, he was doing an ice climbing sequence, and in fact he has a film on the Canon Digital Learning Center right now called Shattered. He did the very first film with the 1DX about a climber, and this is my assistant and I went out and filmed him and his crew at work working with the 5Ds when he was shooting for Patagonia. Landed, you know, he's a still shooter, but since he started shooting motion, he now has another offering that he can bill for. And so he had a gig shooting some catalog work for Patagonia, and they ended up realizing that he was capable of being a motion cameraman for them as well, for either website or, you know, maybe they'll do commercials or whatever. But with the exact same tools, he was able to shoot motion clips and end up making another pretty substantial sale. The best camera of all is the one you have with you, of course, and you may run into that once-in-a-lifetime shot. If you've got a camera that shoots video and you know how to shoot it, you could turn that once-in-a-lifetime shot into a once-in-a-lifetime clip, you know, and I promise you, you're going to earn more money off of it if you make a sale of some incredible event to the networks rather than to the newspapers. They just have more money.
Hi, I'm Tyler Stableford. We're here shooting in Carbondale, Colorado with some ice climbing this winter, and we're at Avocado Valley. And today I'm working with a couple of 5D cameras with a couple of nice lenses that have a 24 tilt shift and also the 24 to 105, a couple of my favorite lenses. When I'm working on the clips, I really like to try to keep my kit as light and as versatile as possible. And so one of the most exciting thing about these Canon HD DSLR cameras is that I can work with a 14 millimeter lens and be shooting 1920 by 1080 video, 15 millimeter fisheye, or 16 to 35 zooms, or different things, tilt shift lenses. And these are the things that really excite me, is that these cameras are light, and I'm also working with the IDC System 0 DSLR rigs. And they're great in the sense that one of the most exciting things is that I can work with my 24 tilt shift lens, tilted all the way, and still have really nice follow focus capabilities with that. And I can quickly throw on another lens. I can put a 14 millimeter lens on here while I'm hanging on the rope or on the climb, and easily swap out lenses. And then I've got essentially the same rig that I just put the kind of the external handle mount on, and this allows me to put a video mic and a monitor as well. So I'll run one system, maybe my wider system with a loop, and then the other system that maybe has some more zoom capabilities and such. I'll run with a monitor.
Yeah, so definitely go to the Canon Digital Learning Center. On the homepage there is a link to Tyler's film Shattered, and you'll quickly recognize how he did it based on seeing this, because it's some real high altitude ice climbing in that one. Some really scary stuff, but Tyler's a real jock when it comes to hanging on the ropes and doing all that work, so you'll want to check it out. This is kind of an overview of the kit that I'm carrying with me as I'm traveling on the round the world deal. And it's essentially the bags that I've got up here. I am toting 2 of the C300s because I am doing a lot of interviews and dialogue. I could honestly be fine functionally with a single, but when I'm in Russia someplace and one of the bodies gets run over by something, then I got to have a backup. So that's really the main reason why I've got duplicates, is the backup mentality. But I'm thinking on one of these upcoming segments that I might leave the C300s behind and go for more of the 5D Mark III look, because now the Mark III does have much improved audio. The Mark II, you couldn't monitor the sound while you were filming, and you certainly couldn't adjust it. Now with the Mark III, you can adjust the audio, you can plug in a headset and monitor it as well. But looking at that top row, got a C300 with the 17 to 55, got some spare batteries for the shotgun mic. Now you'll notice that the shotguns in the picture up there are bigger than the ones I have here. I found that I was actually, with my wide angle, I was actually shooting that extra long dead cat. So I got one of the shorter mics, the Sennheiser Shorty mic, that uses the same phantom power setup here. I think that's called an, I want to say it's an E66, but I'll have to confirm that for you. But they have the long shotgun mic or the short one, so I've gone to the short ones, the same compendium lens shade. I've got a Dolgan Gang battery charger there for the big batteries that the C300s use. I have another one of those for the batteries that the SLRs use. 70 to 200 on an SLR with a little Rode shotgun on top. Then that looks like 24 to 105 on another SLR, and then the 70 to 300 on another C300. Down here on the bottom row is an XF100, which is great for sort of a gun and run where you might need autofocus or just mount a camera on the hood of a car to get an angle. That's a traditional camcorder, but it uses the same codec, albeit from a much smaller sensor. It's the same codec as the C300s, that's the XF100. And then probably a 60D down there with a short lens on it. I like the 60D for my Steadicam because it's got the flip out LCD. Got some XLR cables to be able to monitor or to take one of the shotgun mics off camera. Set of headphones. I've recently gone away from the Sony headphones with the long coiled cord because the coiled cord just has become impossible to deal with. I'll show you that when we bring the lights up, what I'm using now. Back up on a couple of Western Digital My Passport drives, and we've got a very specific backup protocol, which I'll talk to you about as we go a little bit further along. But we essentially back up all the data each night, and we put one of the copies in one vehicle and another one in another one. So if one of the vehicles gets stolen, we still have a set. Actually, we're going to go to 3, and we're going to mail them home periodically or FedEx them home because. Sorry?
Those SSD drives?
No, they're not SSD drives. I'd love to go that way, and as soon as they become more readily available, I'm going to go that way. My laptop, this laptop that I travel with, I replaced the drive with an SSD, 500 gig SSD. I have ordered one of the new Retina display versions with 768 gigabyte SSD. And with Thunderbolt now, everything's changing over. You know, these are FireWire 800, and I've got a newer generation of it that you can daisy chain. You can daisy chain up to 6 or 8 units, I think. So the downloading time is much more agreeable. I tend to use 32 and 16 gigabyte CF cards. You know, 16 gigabytes in when I'm shooting stills. I'm using the 32s for the motion capture. That's still a lot of eggs in one basket, but they're working well. I haven't had any CF card issues in a long time. The C300s do have built-in neutral density turrets, which is great when you're trying to shoot shallower depth of field outside. I carry a 2 to 8 stop Tiffin variable ND. I started out with the Stingray, but I went to the Tiffin ones because they have a wider angle mount and you don't have as much trouble with vignetting. Tiffin now makes their variable ND in 62 millimeter, 67, 72, 77, and 82, all the popular lens sizes. You know, it's spendy to get the variable neutral density, but it's a great way to essentially iris your camera down. To shoot proper video, you're shooting what is, to a still photographer, a relatively lengthy shutter speed. A 60th of a second is the proper shutter speed for shooting 30 frame per second video. 50th of a second would be proper shutter speed for 24 frame per second video. That puts you in a situation where you're getting too much light into the camera out in bright light situations. You end up stopped down a bunch. So neutral density helps to cut the light in bright light situations, and a variable neutral density, you just rotate it to get the exposure that you want.
Have you used the more expensive ones like the Helipans and compared them?
I haven't. I've worked with the Tiffins and the Stingray filters only. I know Schneider has brought out a variable ND. I don't know about Helipan or any of that, but
Someone will like get like $400 or $500 and say they're more sharper.
you know, the gentleman is commenting that, you know, maybe there's a cost to quality relationship there. I know that Tyler and I were checking out, it was Genesis made a variable ND, and we snagged one when we were doing that shoot. And you can do this literally in the store if you're considering a filter. Activate live view, see if you can get it sharp. Just look at live view and see if you can get it sharp. We could not get the Genesis filter to be sharp. They were either mounted out of parallel or they were not ground properly. I don't know what it was, but we could never get a sharp image in live view, which will tell you everything. Whereas we could with the Stingray and with the Tiffin. Haven't tested or checked out any other brands, but you know, bring your camera in, spin the filter onto it, look through it. If it looks good, it is good. If it looks bad, it is bad. May have gotten a bad copy on that Genesis, but it just was not sharp with that in place.
Actually, between the 70 to 200 2.8 and the 70 to 300, except for the aperture difference, are they both same sharp, same resolution?
Yeah, the question was about the 70 to 200 versus the 70 to 300 sharpness and so on. Yeah, I find that 70 to 300 to be lovely. It is slower than the 2.8, but I find I'm stopping down to a 5.6 generally speaking anyway, because paper thin depth of field really is asking for trouble. I mean, when you get your focusing skills nailed, that's all well and good, but an actor or an actress can just, in the middle of a beautiful take, can just lean forward for a little bit of emphasis, and if you're not right on it, you're going to miss it. So I like to give myself a little slop. I love the 70 to 200 so much I own 3 of them. I mean, I want to have one over there, I want to have one over here, I want to have them available to the video camera, to my still cameras without having to move it around. We're going to be in some places where there's a lot of wildlife, and so that extra 100 millimeters will definitely help. And the fact that it is so compact. Because I have to put this in a backpack, I have to walk my gear through customs. I don't ship anything. Anything I'm working with is on my back or on my shoulder. That is how it has to be. And the 70 to 200, yeah, I'll have one for my still kit, but on my video kit so that I can leave the camera built and have the smallest possible follow focus kit. The 70 to 300 has proven to be quite good.
Was the 1 to 4 just too heavy for you?
The 1 to 4, you know, buys you a little bit more, and that works as well, but it's taking the lens on and off. The 1.4 teleconverter is a lovely thing. It's nice and sharp. It makes it a 105 to 270, 280 f4. That's a good way to go, but I'm in dusty environments, really hideously dusty environments, and so if I want to be able to have that 70 millimeter, I'd have to take off the teleconverter. Nothing wrong with that approach. That's a good approach. I'm just, my climate conditions dictate some other stuff as far as I'm going. Lead filters, I carry soft and hard grads so that I can cut the sky. I can hold a good exposure on the ground, but cut the sky back. and I carry tobacco filters. That's a look that gives you that extra warm sort of sunset kind of look. I'll even carry some colorizers, like I might have something, a cyan filter that's a grad, so I can make the sky a little bit bluer if it's not.
Why don't you fix that up later?
Oh yeah, you can fix things later, but there's also something very nice about having it baked in and in the shot. You know, in terms of overexposure, you can't fix it later, you
Like
know.
that, I understand,
But
like
color,
the tobacco, filters.
yeah, probably old habits dying hard. I like to put myself in the mood of what I'm doing by actually seeing it rather than imagining how it'll look. I actually find working with the Canon Log, which is their highest dynamic range camera setting, to be a little bit disconcerting because the images are very flat and very desaturated. And so you're watching the scene on the LCD and you're going, oh man, you know, not seeing the punchiness there. I actually started out shooting with the cine mode, and you know, as long as I'm watching my highlights, it's pretty beautiful, and it makes our post time a lot shorter. You know, I'm producing a long-term documentary project, but I'm also releasing blog postings, video blog postings on a regular basis. So it's all money, you know. I am on the field, on the road, so I have an editor who's working, and he's on the clock. So if I can make it so that his process is a little shorter, then it's more profitable for me. But yeah, you could have an external monitor and see everything adjusted and do all that. But again, it's just how much stuff can I fit in my backpack. So stills and the XF100 goes in my shoulder bag. And then the two C300s and the audio related stuff go in here in my backpack. And I found that I have to use a backpack rather than a wheeled roller because the wheeled assembly on the wheeled roller takes enough room that I really can't fit everything into it. Typical camera phone picture of an evening when we actually stay at a hotel or a bed and breakfast or someplace, charging up the GoPros, charging up all the 5D batteries, charging up all the video batteries. I should add that I have a couple of young men that are on this trip, teenage boys that are avid photographers, and I'm mentoring them, and they're starting to become shooters and trying to contribute to the process. And so we eat batteries like there's no tomorrow. This is left over in here, but it's worth touching on when we consider the camcorder versus the SLRs, or the bigger censored video cameras. The red rectangle represents a 30-inch chip, which is a substantially sized chip. I mean, that's a pretty good sized chip. That's the XF100. The XF300 uses 3 of those, but it gives you a size proportion. The blue represents APS-C and the outer perimeter. It actually shows you the crop factor that you get with the various sensors, because that's like a 14 millimeter lens on a 5D for the overall image. If you put the same 14 on a 7D, that's what it would look like. And if you did adapt down to a video camera, it would give you that more telephoto look. I always have liked this shot that I think Rob Galbraith shot this, but it was on 2 cameras side by side. APS-C sensor camera with like a 400 millimeter lens, and then a 5D Mark II with a tele that allowed the shooter to match the subject size. 2 cameras side by side shooting at the same moment, same aperture. And there's the painterly look of the depth of field, the bokeh, as the Japanese engineers refer to it, on the background frame right versus frame left. Shows you how much you can sort of bring your eye to the guy hailing the bus by virtue of having a larger censored camera. It helps to paint the background in a more abstract way. But all the cameras now, you know, have 1080p capabilities, 24 frames per second. We now have 60 frames per second. I don't have the Mark III on this particular graphic, but now we have 60 frames per second at 720p on the Mark III, which was not available on the Mark II. So the Mark III, while it's not a revolutionary upgrade to the Mark II, it's a good evolutionary upgrade, and I think it's as a still camera, it's improved massively because of the autofocus system is now much improved. As a video camera, yeah, it's better. The audio controls in particular are what's the main thing. ISO ranges these things are capable of. I'm big on lighting. Just because you can shoot at 102,000 ISO doesn't mean you should. When the light is that low, generally it's not that beautifully designed lighting. I work a lot with small LED lights. We can talk about that in a Q&A period here at the end. Neutral density filters, we touched on these. Sunglasses for your camera. I'm liking the Tiffins a lot right now. They're, I think, a little bit more affordable than the Stingrays, which was he was the guy that did it first. And I like the fact that you can, they're relatively thin. The Stingrays are substantially thick, so you got to watch them with wide angles. Okay, so this is a piece that was shot sort of very casually with a combination of SLRs and even point and shoot video. But this was the first trip I did with these guys from the Overland Journal and the Expedition Portal, the group that I'm traveling with now.
Overland Journal, and we are out here in the Grand Staircase Escalante of Utah, and we are trying to get to the most remote point in the lower 48 states. And it's about 30.5 miles from the nearest incorporated city if you were to take a big circle around that range. And that means that you're about 70 miles from point to point. So it's just the kind of thing that we love to do when we take these trucks out into the desert. So it's not only a beautiful place, but it's also a lonely place. So
I
it's
picked up
something where you
one
can
where
get away
it had
from
that problem.
civilization. You can get away
We'll watch
from
a few
other
moments
people,
of it here and
you
then
can come out and
bail.
soak up this beautiful
That you're-
around us.
Thanks for
So
spotting
this is
that.
a beautiful place. It's something that, a place that I'm constantly
The
drawn
kid that
to.
edited this
And, the
was
night,
having a problem with
night
that, and I
sky
think I got
brilliant,
the bad
stars,
version.
we had a little bit of rain even in the early morning, and then it settled down to dust, and the big clouds spread away, and now we've got this beautiful blue sky and a little bit of clouds here and there just to make the photographs better. But overall, for me, this is what we do. This is why we love what we do, is to come to places like this with great and interesting people and take those photographs and share those stories with our readers.
Hi, I'm Bruce Dorn. I live in Prescott, Arizona, and I'm the owner of ITC Photo Video, Canon Explorer of Light. Boy, the U.S. Southwest is just generally incredible, but Utah probably has some of the most iconic landscapes that you'd ever want to see. From the slot canyons down near Page, Arizona, up to the various national parks in the middle of the state. You really can't go wrong. But what I think Utah offers me is just unbelievable vistas and clarity, clean quality that just feels like there's never been anybody else walking through the place. But no matter what, we're already off to a good start and going to have a great time.
I'm Cam Brensinger. I live in Arlington, Massachusetts, and I'm the founder and president of Nemo Equipment Incorporated. Well, we think of ourselves as kind of a solutions company. We're really about outdoor experiences and trying to design and engineer solutions that improve those experiences. So we make a range of equipment for, from backpacking to Arctic exploration, mountaineering, adventure racing, and overland. And in each case, we try to use our experience and the experience of our consumers to create clever solutions to improve the experiences outdoors.
So we spent some time this morning with Cam Brensinger from Nemo Equipment, and Cam is an incredible engineer, and he's created some of the most impressive and durable products in the outdoor industry because he's quite the rock climber, ice climber for many years. I think he's been doing this for over 2 decades and has become quite proficient at it. He spent some time with us showing us rappelling and ascending today, and we're going to need that when we get to the loneliest place tomorrow. So the morning was a relaxing one, a fun one. We got a chance to rappel off about 30 feet and ascend back up the same distance. All the team members got to do that. Some people rappelling for the first time in their life, and that was really fun to watch.
My name is Chelsea McLaren, and I'm from Prescott, Arizona, and I work as an executive assistant for Overland Journal. Yeah, so my first rappel ever, any kind of rock climbing actually. I've never done anything like that. I was a little bit scared at first. Looking down the cliff is pretty intimidating, once you're all hooked up and you feel pretty secure. I was actually surprised at how secure I felt. Yeah, it was easy going down. It was a little bit harder coming up. That was good, and it was secured to a truck, which was nice. And I did watch several other people go down, so it wasn't too scary that way.
My name is Ray Highland. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Overland Journal. It's a beautiful place to learn this, but at the same time, the consequences are a little bigger than they are if you're slipping off a wall in a gym. So getting all hooked up with Cam's advice and learning how the machines work and the different tools and the ropes and going through the safety aspect of it was really valuable. Cam took us through all of the safety aspects of the tools he was using, showed us how it all worked, showed us why we could feel secure, and everybody who did.
Well, I guess that's fair enough time to quit that particular video.
Is any of these up on your website?
Yeah, they certainly are. My takeaway from that one, you saw me using the camera on the monopod, kind of a chipper rig, and we make a cage that goes around the camera we call the rigging cage, and it's set up with 3/8/16, quarter 20 threaded bosses all over it. And then I put a Manfrotto quick release plate, that 501, and then I extended a monopod upside down to hang it down the cliff face. What I want desperately from Uncle Canon is image stabilization on the wide angles. You know, people think image stabilization is all about holding a telephoto, but obviously if we had a 10-22 or some really short focal length lenses with more subtle focus control and image stabilization, the world would be a better place for video for sure. Canon has just announced a little 40mm pancake lens, which I think is the tip of the iceberg of many things to come. It's a very inexpensive lens, but it has optimized, as they carefully worded in their press release, the autofocus is optimized for video capture. A lot of the lenses in their autofocus tend to move, I think, in increments, you know, in kind of zones. You'll see that on point and shoots a lot. And I think that may even be the case in some of the less expensive kit lenses, that they kind of move in zones rather than in really finely crafted steps. But this new generation that they're coming out with, and this is the first lens, 40mm pancake lens, the autofocus has been optimized for use with video cameras. So I can only imagine that means we're going to see a lot of stuff occurring in the near future in that regard. This is a segment that we put together just as a little teaser for a potential sale to a network or one of the adventure channels. You know, we might shop this to Discovery or Travel Network or something like that. So here's a segment that we did recently. This happens to be at 720p. Starting out at 45 below zero up at Prudhoe, the ice road. He burned himself, showing off. There's a map of the world on the hood of each of the trucks that show where we're going, what our pathway is. Quite a conversation starter. Engineer Pass in Colorado, about 13,000 foot scree over the top deal. Greg, who's quite the smoocher, owns the Utah Jazz, and when we came down here to B&H, the commissioner of the NBA came down to say hi. So caused a minor riot out there on the street a couple weeks ago. This is up in Newfoundland. It's weird to come around a corner and see an iceberg in the bay. We're throwing our E7 gang sign. I just hope somewhere in the world that doesn't get us cut, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, on the other piece that blew up in the middle of showing it, that trip to the middle of nowhere was first put on a team from Car and Driver magazine, and I think Land Rover tried to go to the most remote place in the lower 48 states. They identified it by GPS coordinates, a place that was the furthest away from anything, whether it was a highway or an incorporated town. There's a GPS location in Utah. The Car and Driver team tried several times. I don't know if they ever actually made it. Our team made it in, but we had to hike in and out. It was about 18 hours of hiking and rock climbing. It was pretty insane, but we did it, and that piece will run one of these days. Some stills, some iPhone stills up there getting our first diesel fuel up in Prudhoe Bay. This is up on top of Engineer Pass. I tend to use Steadicam products. This GlideCam HD 2000 balanced pretty well with the stripped down version of the C300. That's about the maximum amount of weight you'd want to carry without a spring arm, I think. It really works out your wrist, and that asymmetrical gimbal setup that they have on the GlideCam is not my favorite. I think that the Steadicam technology is by far better. We happened to be rolling through Monument Valley when that annular eclipse occurred. We've done the calculations. We're actually going to see 3 eclipses, solar eclipses, during this trip. We'll see one on the Great Barrier Reef, and we'll see one in Africa down near Cape Town, apparently. Beautiful landscape, but what dumb luck. And it was dumb luck. We were in Monument Valley when the eclipse hit. I wasn't really prepared to shoot it, with the proper kind of filters and so on, but I spent a lot of time shooting the guys out in the light. Here's the lovely little all-terrain dolly. You can get a little bit of a feeling for it. So railroad ties at each end for all practical purposes. Little clamps clamp on 1-inch conduit. A stick of 1-inch conduit, that's a 10-foot piece cut in half, costs $9. So when I travel with the 4 monopods. I can adjust it just like a sawhorse if your sawhorse had adjustable legs. And then the platform takes a 75 millimeter ball if you want to use a fluid head, or there's a flat insert that you can use with a 3/8/16 for something like the little Gitzo 2180 head. But I fly into a city, travel into the city, pick up 3 sticks of conduit. I have 10-foot section of track, cut one of them in half at the store, have the people that sell me the conduit cut one of them in half, so I have a set of 5-foot track and a set of 10-foot track. And then I just dispose of them when I leave.
How much is the rig?
It's about $1,900. It's billet aluminum, with gumball skateboard wheels on it and everything. It's available now. Just got our first delivery of them. Been working out the prototype for about a year. This is on top of one of the safari cars, getting lashed in to do a segment through Times Square. This is documenting getting to Cape Spear. That was our first trip. So it was about 4,600 miles from Flagstaff to Cape Spears, and then the trip down from Prudhoe Bay. So 6,500 miles, maybe close to 7,000 miles, something like that. The wind at Cape Spears was insane. From a workshop a couple of years ago, and this was shot 720p. I'm still negotiating with Uncle Cannon as to whether or not they'll rent me some horses, but on this particular occasion, I put on the workshop myself and I rented a remuda of horses and some Wranglers. So anybody been to Jackson Hole? This is a spectacular location. It's just below Yellowstone. That's the Teton National Park in the background. And this was some video I shot while I was teaching a still photography workshop there. We go out at the end of September, beginning of October, when the aspens are changing. Look at this big grizzly we just ran into along the road. Beautiful big bear. And it's just the most brilliant time of year to be there. The trees are exquisite, the crowds are down. It's really nothing but photographers out there at this time of year.
So that's a national park?
Grand Teton National Park is right there, Yellowstone's right above it, and we're in the freehold, the public lands adjacent. Yellowstone's nice. I gotta say, I think the Tetons they're much smaller, but those mountains are so spectacular. This is what's called Mormon Row. It's the old original homesteads of the first Mormons that went through this area. And in this particular case, we were staying at the Heart 6 Dude Ranch, so we had cowboys on call, and all these guys were on the other end of a radio from me so I could tell them what we wanted in the way of shots. I'm telling you, doing these Canon workshops is the most cost-effective thing you're ever going to do, because they set it up, or we set it up, and then they bring in tech reps. At my shoot last weekend, they had a half a dozen 5D Mark IIIs, a dozen 600EX speed lights, lenses from 14 millimeter up to 300 millimeter, all that you can borrow for the day. So you can try out stuff you've never been able to shoot before. You can show up with zero equipment and just sign out stuff for the day. And then you got me or Tyler Stableford or one of the other explorers there to answer questions and give you guidance. It's an astonishment to me that they don't fill up the second that they're announced. There's probably still some room in this one because they're offering a lot of workshops right now, but if you're not using the Canon Digital Learning Center as a resource, you're missing out. There's incredible tutorials and instructional stuff all over it. It's all about time of day, you know, and making good choices on exposure. You know, you could easily open up for those horses and lose all that beautiful lighting on the midground and the background. So I'm thinking that gets us close enough here to do some Q&A and some closer looks at this stuff. Maybe we'll bring the house lights up if we can, because we'll knock the lights projector down. Yes, sir.
Manuel Bill, Virginia. I wanted to know who did the music. Is the music personally made?
Yeah, thank you. The music is all from Triple Scoop. Triple Scoop is a consortium of Tony, Grammy, Emmy-nominated musicians who kind of went outside of their record labels to create this little organization to license music to people like us. So they have a lot of shorter, medium-length clips of personal work that's been composed by the various musicians that contribute to the site, and you can license it for a really reasonable rate. You know, obviously we would flip out if someone took if one of our pictures ended up on somebody's album cover and we didn't get any credit and didn't get any payment for it. It's just flat wrong to take, you know, a CD that you own and just assume that nobody will ever hear it. The music industry takes theft very seriously, so I'd be very careful about it. Even if you're doing a video for a family event, a wedding or something like that, and you grab some known piece of music, you are in jeopardy, because just because you buy a CD doesn't mean that you can add it to a video or a collection of stills. So Triple Scoop Music, a really good source. They got a lot of great musicians on there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
When you're in the Toyota and say you're going over some rough terrain, do you have any kind of rig for the camera if you want to shoot something spontaneously?
Yeah, it's the question is about being able to shoot a vehicle hitting the ground roughly. A lot of camera shake. I do a lot of helicopter work as well. and shot off of boats and all kinds of stuff, but I've done a ton of helicopter work. And you either have a gimbal mount that mounts on the front of the ship, or you have a Tyler mount in the doorway, or you're hand holding. And if it's going to be particularly rough, I'll put a couple of C-clamps, little C-clamps in the door frame, take the door off on a helicopter, for example, just to give you an extreme version. And then I use my rigging cage, which is essentially just a little eco-skeleton that goes around the outside of the camera. I have a couple of eyelets on top, and then I use bungee cords. And so what I'll do is I'll get it so it's kind of neutrally buoyant, you know, it's going to take a certain amount of the stretch out of the thing. And then what I do is I just try to isolate. You know, it's the same thing where, you know, I could be doing all kinds of business here, which you don't want to watch, but I could be making a lot of movement here as long as I'm isolating it through my arm. That's all a Steadicam is the isolation of these three principal joints. So if I'm trying to shoot out the car is doing all this, I'm essentially just compensating for it by not, and one of the main things is don't have your back against the back of the seat. Kind of scoot forward so you just plant it on your tuchus, and then you're not translating the hits of the shock of the vehicle through your back and then into your arms. But it can get pretty heavy pretty quickly, so a couple of bungee cords, and then you're essentially just controlling it. You're not supporting it, you're controlling it. And then of course, image stabilized lens, if at all possible. Do I do anything special about rolling shutter? Not really. You know, the helicopter shot that showed the rotor blades, you could see them twisting and distorting and so on. But the nature of a CMOS sensor is that it writes on from top to bottom, so you're going to get a little of that anyway. But with each generation, I think they're improving it with the software. Honestly, my general thinking is that if the shot is compelling enough, you're not seeing a lot of that. Back in the motion days, we used to call it strobing. When you'd pan quickly, you'd get, you know, the fence post or the light pole here, it jumps. So I just tend to move more gently, you know, to avoid it if it turns out that it's going to be a big problem. The SLRs are great for doing interviews because generally you're not having to move the camera a whole lot. You know, there's two schools of thought. One is where the interviewer or the interviewee looks directly into the lens, and the other is the off-axis. And almost everybody does the off-axis version, where I've set up the camera here, I'm interviewing you, but really the person that's interviewing is standing over here. So you're looking over here and you're not self-conscious about the camera. And that's kind of an industry standardized version of it. I come from a narrative filmmaking background, working to scripts and all that. So there's a lot of things about documentary that I'm discovering freshly. The first couple of documentary projects I did, I had the people talking directly into the camera and I pulled it off. But the way I pulled it off, and your own, I think you should just try it with a buddy before you go to one of your hero subjects. Just get a buddy and set up and try to do it. Number one, light it nicely. Don't overlight it. Use a single source from 3/4, one side or the other, and maybe a little fill reflector, but don't automatically go to a 3-light pattern. Maybe a hair light, maybe not. But light it nicely, be very asymmetrical in the frame. Don't bullseye the person in the middle of the frame. Put them off to the left, put them off to the right. But you might try this other thing that I tried, and it doesn't always work, but it works sometimes. I work with people that are not professional talent, and I like the notion of them addressing the camera and therefore addressing the viewer directly. So what I would do is I'd get my camera set up on a tripod. I'm going to be doing an interview with you. I'm instantly set. I know what my exposure is, and I've got the camera rolling. But I'm pretending to be incompetent. I engage the person in conversation. I go, I'm pretty new at this. I'm still trying to figure out the camera. If you don't mind, we'll just talk a little bit while I'm setting up. So you played in the NBA. Tell me a little bit about your career. And I'm apparently monkeying around with the camera, but in fact it's rolling. And the person's just naturally looking at me directly behind the camera, and I sort of duck down behind the camera as if I'm working with the menus, and then they by default start playing into the lens. But it's always going to be about prompting them to speak well. And you got to prompt them to not you must never prompt in such a manner that it could be answered with yes or no. It's got to be answered with a explanatory. That's the main thing I can share. Oh, well, I think any of the SLRs work brilliantly, but I would do secondary audio. I'd get a Zoom H4n or a Tascam or something and mic them separately. You don't necessarily have to have a lav. You can have a shotgun just below the frame line, aimed at their mouth, just above or just below. And the general thinking is if you've got air conditioning vents up here, don't be shooting up because it'll shoot past the person and get the air conditioning vents or the airplane flying over if you're outside. So you'd be boomed in over the top, aim toward their mouth, get a nice narrow angle of acceptance, get the audio set, roll, let the camera record the audio through its little noise collector mic, and then line it up in post using Pluralize or one of the lineup audio things that they have now for Final Cut. Yes, sir.
What's your workflow in the field?
Workflow. So we're working off of data cards. We're not working off of secondary audio recorders. So if I was wandering out to go do a shot, Land Cruiser comes to a stop, I focus this thing on 1.5 feet, I turn it around and I go, we're at Prudhoe Bay, we're going to be shooting interviews outside the trucks with the Chugach Mountains in the background. And then I shoot that sequence. When I go to another setup, another location, we're now on Adigan Pass on the Alcan Highway. I'm going to shoot nothing but B-roll, no sound. And then I proceed to shoot. Then the cards, I pull the cards, and at the end of the day,
What size cards do you usually use?
16 or 32 gig cards.
You go up to like 64.
You certainly could. I'm not too afraid of all the eggs in one basket kind of a thing at this point. It's real easy to lose a wallet of cards, but the goal is that at the end of the night, we go through and keeping all of the data. I create a master folder that is for that date, and then inside of it, hopefully I can pull the cards in the sequence that I shot them. We keep the clocks on our home time. In other words, if I'm in Australia, I'm still on Prescott time on all the cameras. We just keep it set up like that. And then we know, and we set the clocks on the cameras off of a computer, the same computer, so all of them are essentially on the same clock time, free run clock time.
As far as your releases go, do you use on-camera releases or just all paper releases?
Paper releases, yeah.
I'm trying to get a feeling about, does on-camera releases hold the same weight as paper?
Well, the question is about releases, on-camera releases versus paper releases. The awful truth about a release is it exists in the moment. The court cases have found in favor of the people that protest a release more often than not. That's the sad truth. It goes back to that Folgers thing, I think it was, where a stock photographer shot a guy drinking a cup of coffee, paid the guy $100 for a day's worth of stock photography, sold it to Folgers for a ton of money. It became an iconic image on their packaging. The talent went back and got a lot of money. And then those kind of cases have happened a couple of times. My release protocol on commercialized stuff, and that's, it's documentary type thing is another story, but on stuff that's for advertising or any commercial sales, I have 3 releases essentially in my pocket. One that is 5% of what the value I receive for the project, 10%, 15%. And I start low, and if they'll sign the 5%er, I get that signed. And if I sell the image for $50,000, I go back and give them 5% of it. It's a hassle hunting them down, but I've been doing this 30 years and I've never had any conflict. Never any lawsuit, never any challenge. Just treat people fair. You can. There's 2 or 3 cases out there, where they have found in favor of the on-camera talent because the values are. No, that the judge looks at it and goes, "You paid how much and you got how much?" They see an imbalance in it, because a lot of people do that $1 token thing or prints, give you somebody something of value in exchange for valuable consideration. You give them $1, they sign the thing, and then you make a big sale. They can challenge it. They have challenged it. There are court cases that have found in favor of the person that they feel is aggrieved. So
you use the 5, 10, 15. That's your lowest, starting lowest, and that's what you lowest done.
yeah. All right. Well, Feel free to come up and poke some of this stuff or ask me further questions if you want to, but that's pretty much what I've got today, and it looks like we're right on schedule of being 4 minutes late, being done. Thank you. Appreciate it.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.